Hello, good afternoon. 3 men have died in a farm accident near Thetford in Norfolk. It happened near Croxton this morning. The bodies of 3 men were recovered by fire crews from a tank of slurry. Well, our reporter Simon Newton's at the scene and joins us live now. Simon, a dreadful story. What exactly happened?
Well, yes, details about what exactly happened here are emerging this afternoon. The tank in question is the left hand of those two, the dark green coloured one. We understood it contained liquid chicken waste. Now, we don't know exactly what happened, but it's thought that one of the 3 men involved may well have been overcome by fumes, fallen into that tank. 2 other workers may well have tried to come to his rescue and also been overcome or somehow fallen into the tank, and all 3 of those men have drowned. The paramedics were called here at about just after 8 o'clock this morning. They then called the fire brigade, who came and removed the men's bodies from that tank, and all 3 were pronounced dead at the scene a short time afterwards. Now, police are saying they're not treating this as a suspicious series of deaths, although they are treating this area, if you like, as a crime scene at the moment. Now, HSE Health and Safety Executive investigators are here at the scene. Some more are coming from Birmingham. We should have some more details hopefully this afternoon, and more for you at 6 o'clock.
The waste team were in an agricultural field 2 to 3 miles outside Thetford, and what they were doing was disposing of abattoir waste, which is effectively dirty water, a mixture of semi-solid and liquid material. The actual process of spreading the waste involved transferring the waste firstly to a nurse tank beside the field, and then there was a team of people who pumped the waste from the nurse tank out via a long umbilical pipeline to a tractor that was chugging up and down the field. The tractor was then injecting the material into the fields. The problem with this particular material is it is semi-solid, and over a period of time the solid material settled to the bottom. It meant that eventually the discharge on the tank would fur up. So periodically they had to dislodge this material and pump it through and clean the tank out. And the field manager in question took the long hose up onto the top of the tank. He opened the hatch. He directed this hose inside the tank with a view to dislodging this material. And then his colleague, who was operating the road tanker, set his pump going, and then liquid at high pressure was discharged into the tank with the object of dislodging this material. Unfortunately, in the process of doing that, the gentleman on top of the tank fell into the tank. We're not completely sure how he managed that, but bear in mind the hose that he was holding was under pressure, so it would have whipped around a bit. It possibly was slippery, but nonetheless he fell into that tank, and unfortunately, because of the nature of the material inside the tank, he was overcome by the lack of oxygen and the other materials in there. Almost immediately he entered the tank, and he subsequently drowned in the liquor at the bottom. He had with him at the time 2 colleagues. Those 2 colleagues attempted to get him out of the tank, and they entered through the same hatch as he did, except deliberately this time, and unfortunately they suffered the same fate. A 4th gentleman who arrived a little while later also attempted a rescue, but fortunately he was able to get out of the tank before he suffered the same end as they did.
2 firefighters, we believe, from Thetford Fire Station entered the container to find the casualties and attach lines to the casualties, or ropes I should say, to the casualties, so that they could then be hauled by the other members of the crew out through a hatch to fresh air, where tragically we know that later on they were confirmed deceased by the ambulance staff on scene.
I suppose about 18 inches from the top you could actually see inside the container. The first persons I see in there were 3 people laying down in the container, 2 face down, 1 face up. I then went back to the crew, told them that there's definitely 3 persons in there and that they needed to take a line in with them, and the person to bring out first would be the person who was face up, because there was more of a chance of maybe recovering him. And when they got inside, there was about 12 inches of really, really thick slurry, which was making it very awkward for them to move about. Then as soon as they got the first casualty and tied a line around the first casualty, I then got a team up top to pull the casualty up. We then put a sort of recovery area next to the tank, which paramedics come up, and then the idea was to pull the first casualty up as quick as we could, put him over the side and lower him down so the paramedics could deal with him straight away. Because of the type of slurry, the crew that was in there found it very difficult moving about in there, because every time they tried to move their feet were stuck. They were then getting slurry over their gloves, the tunics, the uniforms, so everything they were touching was sort of slipping off them. It was hard to get the casualty up, you know.
For these men, this should have been a normal working day, carrying out a procedure that undoubtedly they've probably carried out many, many times before. But somehow something went wrong, and whatever it was, it cost these 3 men their lives.
What we think caused the deaths of the 3 victims was a combination of factors. The tank in question contained organic waste, and organic waste, when it decomposes, gives off a number of gases, including carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide, and hydrogen sulfide. It also depletes the oxygen in the atmosphere. So within this tank there was a combination of low oxygen and high carbon dioxide, and in the bottom of the tank there was also some liquid. Now what we think happened is that when the first gentleman fell in, he was overcome probably in a matter of seconds, no more than 30 seconds. He was unconscious due to the combined effects of low oxygen and high carbon dioxide in the tank, and as a result of that he became unconscious and fell into the bottom of the tank, where he drowned in the liquor at the bottom. The 2 other gentlemen who tried to rescue him probably suffered the same fate.
They were aware that he disappeared. I gather they'd had no training, so they had no concept of what was in the tank, and therefore assumed that it was all right to go in because no one had told them otherwise. The access, I gather, was rather difficult, so they'd have been concentrating on that. If there had been any hydrogen sulfide, gas of decomposition, then probably the concentration was so great that only after a breath or 2 their sense of smell would have gone, so that warning would have disappeared. And as the first one descended, only a breath would have meant no oxygen to his brain, dizziness, disorientation, unconscious within a couple of breaths. And then he, of course, would have fallen, because one of the immediate effects of lack of oxygen was inability to move muscles, and he would have then hit the sludge. He may have had 1 breath by the time he got to the bottom, but that, of course, would have been just sewage. Human compassion says that the next guy sees this catastrophe. He doesn't know what's in the tank and how it's distributed and what it means, so he repeats the same mistake of the first guy.
The 4th gentleman, who arrived on site a little later, as I've described, actually entered the tank twice. He went in with a view to rescuing one of the gentlemen who'd initiated the initial rescue, and he found himself being overcome by what was in the tank. He left the tank again, was able to climb out, take a deep breath and have a second attempt.
Second time, he would still have been in a severely oxygen depleted atmosphere, felt very strange again, couldn't turn, couldn't move anybody. I suspect that he can't have lost consciousness completely, because otherwise he would have been in the water breathing sludge like the other 3. So something innate kept him going, got him out, and the only way out was up, and at which point the other person on the site realised that he looked wrong, groggy, and told him very sensibly to get out of the way, sit in fresh air and recover.
His witness statement is chilling for the fact that he clearly was very close to suffering the same fate as his colleagues.
I climbed up the ladder, looked into the bin and saw 3 sets of overalls floating on top of the sludge. I climbed down the inside ladder to the level of the sludge. I tried to turn the nearest person over. I felt myself getting short of breath and my vision was becoming starry and black. I climbed up a bit until my head was out of the manhole. My head cleared and I went back down into the tank and tried to turn the second person over. I started to suffer a shortage of breath and the same symptoms of blurred vision as before, and I fell backwards into the liquid. I must have partly lost consciousness as I heard someone call my name. This gave me the impetus to haul myself out of the tank. I climbed to the ground and walked to the front of the lorry where I sat and recovered.
I think overarching all of this is the lesson that confined spaces are deadly if they're treated in the wrong way. It's the realisation that you can get yourself into a situation very quickly and a fatal situation almost as quickly. The Thetford accident was by no means an isolated incident. Just looking back over the last few years, there's a number of incidents that come to mind. 2 gentlemen entered a tank on a food premises in the northwest of England. Only one of them got out. There was an incident on a farm in the home counties. 2 farm workers went into a slurry tank. Neither of those came out. There was an incident on the Thames estuary where a gentleman decided to carry out some repairs in a petrol tanker without preparing it and purging it properly, and unfortunately that ended in an explosion. So it describes the range of activity, but what it does bring home clearly is that almost every time there's more than one person involved, and it involves a lack of planning and awareness of what they're actually going into. It seems like a silly thing to say, that in an emergency you'll be in a hurry, but actually it's amazing how many people forget that they won't have time to think. And if you think that the 3 gentlemen in this tank were probably unconscious in less than 30 seconds, they had no thinking time at all.